Hey YouTube, welcome back to my channel. So tonight we're actually in my kitchen, and what I am about to do is I'm about to prep me up a couple pounds of beef jerky. I don't know about everybody else, but one of the things that I absolutely love in terms of snack foods is beef jerky. However, when you go to the stores to try to buy it, I mean, just a little stick will cost you $7, $8, $9, and having a love of jerky, just it gets expensive very, very fast. So a few months ago, what I did was I purchased myself a dehydrator and got myself some jerky cure and seasoning. So I decided I was going to mix up a couple fresh batches tonight, and I figured I'd bring you guys along with me. Okay, so laid out on the counter in front of me is some supplies. First and foremost, I have from Walmart their Gamekeeper beef jerky mix. I've got two flavors, mesquite, and I also have hickory. I've never actually tried these before, so I'm not entirely sure of how they're going to turn out. My favorite brand it's one that comes from Cabela's. I don't quite remember the name of it, but I want to say it's like Old Country or something. You can get it on Amazon. It's pretty cheap. The Gamekeeper jerky seasoning kits, I know these are like $3 or $4 a piece. So I'm really curious on how they're going to turn out. So I've decided I'm going to actually make both of these tonight. So I'm going to put those aside. So some of the supplies we're going to need. We're going to need a bowl to be able to mix our meat and our seasoning and cure in. We will need a measuring cup, preferably a 1 cup. If you have the smaller ones, that's absolutely fine. You do need something that's at least a 1/4 of a cup. I also have to my right some measuring spoons. Now I'm really only going to need one for the jerky I'm making tonight, but I had to pull those off the ring since my 1 tablespoon is dirty right now, so I figured I would just lay those all out over here. I have my ground beef. Now you can make beef jerky with ground beef, lean meat, whatever. The recipe does call for the leanest meat you can get your hands on. However, this is the 80/20 from Kroger's. I've never gone with this fatty of a meat, so I'm not sure how it's going to turn out. But I don't have too many other uses for ground beef other than burgers, and trying to watch my weight right now, so I'm not going to make a ton of hamburgers. Um, One thing I do want to note is you guys will see me use bottled water. That's not called for in the recipe. However, I did have a water outage at my house just about a week and a half ago, and the water company has us under a boiled water advisory. So instead of me having to worry about that, I just pulled out a bottle of water. Now, because I'm working with what was a 3-pound roll of meat, I did pull out my food scale. That way it'll allow me to measure out the recommended amount of meat that it wants me to use. So the first thing I want to do is, well, it's on now, kind of. Or are you broke? I just put a different battery in it this morning, so I don't know how it's going to turn out. Alright. So it's on. So what I'm doing right now, I just wanted to zero it out. Wait for it to read. Now I'm going to change it over to there we go. Pounds, ounces. So I changed it over to ounces because the recipe is going to call for a pound of meat. So now I'm just going to zero out my scale. And so the first flavor I'm going to make is the hickory. Now, according to the recipe, it wants me to use 1 pound of meat. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to put some ground beef down into my bowl. 1 pound, 1 ounce, that's perfectly fine. So I can take the scale, I can move that out of my way for the time being. So I've got a pound of meat already partitioned out right here. So the next thing I want is, since I'm going to go with the hickory seasoning first, it wants me to use 3 teaspoons of the flavoring. Now I have already opened these packages and pasted the flavoring. I don't know if anybody else does it that way, but it's something I like to do. So 3 teaspoons. Now it does call for level teaspoons, so what I do like to do is after I've got some of the seasoning on my measuring spoon, I'll just rub it against the top of the bag, and that'll do an okay job of leveling it out. 2 and 3. So there's 3 teaspoons of my hickory seasoning. Now the recipe also does call for 1 level teaspoon of cure. Now for the Gamekeeper cure, it's just going to come in this Mylar bag, which I haven't opened yet. I mean, we all know what cure tastes like. It's salt. And I forgot a pair of scissors. So I'm going to do exactly what our mom has always told us not to do and open it with my teeth. Oh yeah. So what did I say? 1 teaspoon, yep, 1 teaspoon of cure. It's about level. So I'll go ahead and put my cure down in there. So now, I'm just going to pack that away. I need 1/4 cup of water, so I'll take my measuring cup, pour a quarter cup of water. Now it does want cold water, and so this water has been sitting at room temperature. So I'm just going to reach over to my ice maker, grab an ice cube real quick, swirl that sucker around in there to chill this. Oh yeah, that's got some chill to it. That's a 1/4 cup. Now the instructions do say you want to mix the meat with the cure and the seasoning for about 5 minutes. Ooh. Okay, so now I've got my meat mixed with my jerky cure and seasoning. Now you can just throw a lid on your Tupperware container and that's gonna be fine. However, what I like to do is I'll get the 1 gallon freezer bags and I'll just put my meat down in there, and I'll show you why here in a second. So I'll put that off to the side for now because I'm going to have to do another pound here in a moment. So what I'm going to do is I've just left my bag with a little bit of an opening so I can push out as much air as I possibly can. Now, just a disclaimer guys, we are working with raw meat, so you do want to try to practice safe food handling procedures. In other words, don't handle any other foods until you've washed your hands, unless it's another raw meat. You don't really want to cross-contaminate any foods. So if you're handling like raw chicken, wash your hands before you move on to raw beef, and so on and so forth. It'll just reduce your risk of food poisoning. And I've had food poisoning more than once in my life, and I really did not like that. And as anybody who's ever had food poisoning can tell, it is not a fun experience. And it's usually 2 days of absolute discomfort and hell. So I've got my meat spread out in this freezer bag, and part of the reason I'm doing that, can that be seen okay? No, it cannot. So let me tilt my camera down just a little bit further. There we go. So what I've done was I took my pound of meat and I put it in the 1 gallon freezer bag. One, it makes it a little bit easier for me to get air out of there, and I don't know if pulling air out of your bag makes it any better of a jerky, but it's something that I started doing. I can't remember why. Oh yeah, I remember why. So the reason I started doing this was twofold. One, we all have very limited space in our refrigerators, and when you flatten out your meat like this, you can just store it right on the back and you're fine. Not only that, and I'll be showing this in the next part of this video, is when I actually go to take this meat out and put it in my jerky gun, all I got to do is I just got to rip this bag open, and then I can fold it in half and basically roll it up almost like a cinnamon roll and just shove it down into the reservoir on my jerky gun and get rolling. I've found the cleanest way to get it done. So this batch is done and ready, so I can go ahead and move that off to the side. I can now go ahead and just throw it in my fridge, let it sit overnight, And then what I'll do first thing in the morning when I get out of bed and I'm awake and I've had my caffeine and I'm not a horrible human being, I'll go ahead, turn the dehydrator on and get that going, which I will also show you guys that, so I wouldn't worry too much. So I'll get going on that in 3, 2, 1. And I'm back. It's the next morning, YouTube. So I've let my ground beef sit overnight in the fridge, and at this point it looks like it's pretty much ready to go. So last night as I was making everything, I showed you that it started off pink, then moved into a dark brown. So now it's more of like a reddish brown at this point. It's nice and cold. I've had plenty of time to let it sit and cure in the fridge overnight. So I'm going to go ahead get to throwing it on my dehydrator. Okay. So I have this morning's supplies laid out on my counter. First thing you're going to need, it's not a necessity, but it makes my life a lot easier, especially since I'm working with ground beef. I have what is called a jerky gun. So in it is just a reservoir. It's basically like a caulking gun, but built for beef jerky. On the end I have 2 1-inch openings that will shoot out 2 pieces of jerky at a time. Off to the left over here I have my AI Cook dehydrator. Now, just as a general disclaimer for everybody, beef jerky recipes do say that you need to heat the meat up to at least 160 degrees to make it 100% safe for consumption. Now the AI Cook home dehydrator, it does only, according to its instructions, heat up to about 158 degrees, which is 2 degrees shy of what the instructions say is safe. So I would recommend getting yourself a dehydrator that heats up to at least 160 degrees. However, the AI Cook, I've never had food poisoning off of the jerky that goes on it. So yeah, this for me has been perfectly safe. I'll leave a link to it in the description down below in case anybody wants to check it out. But I would recommend getting something that heats it up to be quite a bit warmer than what I do. I was a cheapskate when I bought it, but it works really well. I've used it for beef jerky. I've used it for dehydrating bananas, which is one of my favorite snacks. So moving on from that, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and screw the lid off of this. And so you can see I've got quite a deep little reservoir here. So then my next step, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take my 2-pronged lid and we'll set it gently right over top. I mean, it doesn't click in place or anything, so you got to be a little careful about that. Now, if I remember right, this is the Nesco jerky gun. And then what I try to do is make sure that this is relatively even based on how I know I'm going to hold it. Screw that on nice and tight. Throw this away. And then to make it easy, you'll see that the meat is kind of bunched up in here, but there's a lot of open spaces. So what I like to do is I'll just adjust that a little bit. I'll put my hand right up against the nozzle and I'll give it a few clicks. But not too many, because what I just did here was I just pushed it out of my jerky gun. So yay for that. Let me pull that back just a bit so I can fix this. It's probably about time to replace this, to be honest. Alright, so now you see that I got a little bit of meat coming out of it. So what I'll do is just a couple clicks, pinch it off in my hand, and then, oh yeah, I can tell you this is probably not going to be a great batch. This meat has come out very moist and sticky. But we'll see. The first few pieces could feel a little weird anyway. So all my ground beef is sitting on the dehydrator at this point. It usually takes, I'd say, about 4 to 6 hours for all of the meat to dehydrate appropriately. I try to leave it on for about 7. Once it hits 5, I'll start kind of testing the meat out. I'll randomly select some of these strips towards the bottom where the heating element is, and I'll tear them apart and see how moist they are. Typically, it's ready to go once you notice no more moisture on the outside. Now, I do like to have my beef jerky a little bit on the moist side, so I won't necessarily always leave it on for as long as I'm supposed to. But I do understand that I am taking a risk with foodborne illness, and that is a risk that I will happily accept for a slightly more moist piece of meat. Now again, as a disclaimer guys, this meat is only for my personal consumption. If I were to be giving this out to any friends, any family, trying to sell it or anything like that, I would practice a little bit better food handling procedures, and I would definitely have a dehydrator that goes up to a much higher temperature. Alright YouTube, and I'm back. At this point, it's about 6 o'clock in the afternoon here in West Virginia, and I've had my beef jerky on the dehydrator for I'd say about 7.5, almost 8 hours now. So I'm about to pull it off and we're going to see how it turns out. Okay, so let's go ahead and move this dehydrator out of the way. So I've got a Tupperware bowl that I'm going to throw my jerky into. So we're going to go from bottom rack to the top. Ooh, that's hot. Alright, so we can see that the finished jerky now has this like deep red maroon color to it. Now the way I go about it is it does look like it's in pretty good shape. So because it's very hot, I want to be very quick about pulling this off. And then once it's had a moment or two to cool off, I'll try a piece. And then we'll actually get my dog in here. We'll let him give it a shot. So one of the things you'll notice as I'm pulling these strips off, they have shrunk quite a bit. Now that is one reason why you want to use the leanest meat you can possibly get. Because as that fat drips off, and once I'm done emptying this, I'll show you some of the fat that's accumulated in the bottom. But as that fat heats up and drips off, the jerky will shrink. Woo! Warm. Real warm. I'm going to set that aside. That'll be for the dog to taste test. Now I do like to feed my dog some beef jerky as a treat. However, do keep in mind that beef jerky does tend to be very, very high in sodium. So we don't want to give our dogs too much, but the occasional piece when they're being good doggies, that's okay. And then once it's cooled off, I'll actually get in there and I'll break some of this up too. Ooh, that's getting warm. Alright, last tray. Now, if you remember earlier in the video, I did make 2 separate batches. One was a mesquite and the other was a hickory. I've at this point lost track of which is which. So, we'll call it mystery meats. Okay, so we shut the dehydrator off now, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to move these trays out of the way. I've got to clean them anyway because they are greasy. Alright, so I've got all my jerky off of the dehydrator. Let's give it a try. It's not bad. I mean, compared to the other brand of jerky seasoning and cure I use, this is nowhere near as good, but not bad for a snack. Let's do this. Let's see how my dog feels about it. You You ready? Come here. Come here, buddy. Sit down. Good boy, right? Want another? Sit. Lay down. There you go, right? Right here. All right. Well, the taste tester's opinion is back. He didn't spit it out, so apparently it's decent jerky. Do me a solid. Hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, hit the bell for notifications. I'm going to be throwing up a lot more videos like this of just me doing things around the house and the property that kind of apply to what I want to do. So I appreciate you guys taking a little bit of time to sit here and watch. And take care.